Nothing else matters. The avocations about which people weary themselves are as foolish child's play compared with this one serious business of bringing up our children in advance of ourselves. Rousseau. I know a family, and their family motto is, unto the last generation. And they are teaching their children this philosophy that bringing up the future in advance of ourselves is the greatest goal and work on earth. God placed the training of every child in the hands of two, a father and a mother. As the waters answer to the drawing of the moon, so do the hearts of parents rise to the idea of the great work committed to them. I thought this was a beautiful way to put it. It is difficult. It is not easy, which is why it's not designed to be undertaken alone. We need each other, especially in raising our children. Be his knowledge of the law little or much, no parent escapes the call to rule. There's so much in that little sentence. Like it or not, here it comes. You are the king and queen of your household, and you are called to rule it righteously. Judge righteous judgment. Because as you judge, so shall ye be judged. And I could just go on forever with this one, but I'll let it stand. Be his knowledge of the law little or much, no parent escapes the call to rule. Possibly the unregulated love of approbation in devoted parents has more share in the undoing of families than any other single cause. Approbation means approval, sanction, commendation, or giving official support. This is to be reserved and only used when the child is actually doing a good thing. The love of approbation, it would follow, would mean praising your children without cause. So you're praising them just because they're your child, not because they've done anything worthy of praise. And Charlotte Mason would say that this is one of the things that has caused the destruction of the family, because this is basically a habit of lying to your child. They're good just because they're your child is not true. They're good when they are being good. I found lots of food for thought in there. I would continue by pointing out that the opposite is also a problem when you have parents that never praise their children because they are their children, and that we need to find a healthy balance. And let's practice, all of us, the art of speaking the truth to our children. So when they are truly good and doing a good thing, tell them. And when they are truly horrid and doing a horrid thing, tell them, so that they have an honest gauge to interpret with. The love of ease, the love of favor, the claims of other work are only some of the causes which lead to a result disastrous to society, the abdication of parents. Charlotte Mason felt very strongly that parents were the first line of defense safeguarding the future. It is their role and their calling to take responsibility for their children that they have been gifted. That's why she made it her mission in life to support parents in this calling. Parents who hold their children as at the same time a public trust and a divine trust, and who recognize the authority they hold as deputed authority, not to be trifled with, laid aside, or abused. Such parents preserve for the nation the immunities of home and the safeguard of the privileges of their order. Your children are a public trust because you can't keep them at home forever. Eventually they will adventure out into the world, and the public is trusting you with educating them in how they should conduct themselves when they leave your house. Your children are a divine trust because they are God's children, not yours. You are his deputy. He has entrusted you with the care of his children in this world. This is our opportunity to practice righteous sovereignty within the walls of our very own homes. That is a responsibility that is not to be trifled with, laid aside, or abused. Indeed. A single decision made by the parents, which the child is or should be capable of making for itself, is an encroachment on the rights of the child and a transgression on the part of the parents. Your children are not your property to do with however you please. As my father has said, parenting is the practice and the art of making a graceful retreat. You start with a baby, an infant, doing everything for them, washing them, feeding them, dressing them, and eventually you want them to be washing and feeding and dressing themselves. Ideally, learning from you how to be their own righteous sovereign. As for the employment of authority, the highest art lies in ruling without seeming to do so. In this way, we can take a leaf out of God's book, right? You just teach them the correct principles and they will govern themselves. Perceive that God uses men and women, parents above all others, as vehicles for the transmission of his gifts. I love this so much. We are instruments in the hands of the Lord in blessing each other's lives, and that includes blessing our children. The child brings with him into the world not character, but disposition. He has tendencies which may need only to be strengthened, or again to be diverted, or even repressed. His character is original disposition modified, directed, expanded by education, by circumstances, later by self-control and self-culture, above all, by the supreme agency of the Holy Ghost, even where that agency is little suspected and as little solicited. Babies are all innocent, and they're also all different. They each have their own disposition. I love that. She's identified that we each have our own unique disposition when we're born, and that we develop our character over the course of our life. Sow an act, reap a habit. Sow a habit, reap a character. Sow a character, reap a destiny. Sowing in this sense is of course referring to planting a seed. So if you plant the seed of your actions, you reap your habits. The habits that you allow to continue are where you get your character. And your character is what determines your destiny. Because you are in control of your actions, the actions you choose to do in this life, that means you can also control your habits and your character and eventually your destiny. You are the architect of your own destiny. This is obviously an ancient proverb. Charlotte Mason didn't invent it, but she has this wonderful collection of just thoughts and comments about parenting. To excite this appetency towards something, towards things lovely, honest, and of good report, is the earliest and most important ministry of the educator. Whatever disposition the child may have been born with, we are given the first 6 years of their lives to help develop the habits of cherishing life and all the other beautiful habits that we can bestow upon them. Education is a life. That life is sustained on ideas. Ideas are of spiritual origin, and God has made us so. I know Charlotte Mason can sound a little preachy to modern man, but there are so many beautiful ideas, and the ideas that she's collected, she found all these ideas, collected them together, and shared them with as many parents as she could. Contemporary opinion is the fetish of the young mind. They by no means confine themselves to such leaders of thought as their parents have elected to follow. On the contrary, the other side of every question is the attractive side for them, and they do not choose to be behind the foremost in the race of thought. It's true that human beings tend to get caught up in the wave of the next new thing. Reservations regarding science. The teaching of today may be the error of tomorrow, because new light may lead to new conclusions. The same holds true today. Science becomes errant ideology when it becomes bogged down with false traditions. We might fill pages with the wise things people say who, for one excellent reason or another, prefer to leave it to the school teacher to make a child sit up. This is an abdication of parents that Charlotte Mason did not approve of. It is not the teacher's job to make a child sit up. It's a character issue. The early habits are vital. Reversion to these takes place, and Jack sprawls as a man just as he sprawled as a child, only more so. Teaching them early is one of the ways that we gift our children with the art of their own sovereignty. Teaching Jack how to sit up and how to make himself sit up is how we help him become his own sovereign, so that he can sit up when he wants to sit up and he isn't subject to his own bad habits. Now, it is this sort of bringing under that parents are apt to leave to the teacher. They do not give their children the discipline which results in self-compelling power, and the time for training has gone by. Leaving the child's character into the teacher's hand is what Charlotte Mason felt was bringing the child under as opposed to bringing the child up. Discipline does not mean a birch rod, nor a corner, nor a slipper, nor a bed, nor any such last resort of the feeble. The sooner we cease to believe in merely penal suffering as a part of the divine plan, the sooner will a spasmodic resort to the birch rod die out in families. We do not say the rod is never useful. We do say it should never be necessary. This was such an interesting little tidbit of wisdom when I first read it, and with my first child, we tried so many different things, trying to figure out how to be parents. It's not that the rod is never useful, but if you open your mind to the divine, you can be inspired towards holier methods of raising God's children, and they are His, and He will help you raise them. But you have to have an ear open to His counsel. Discipline. Mothers and fathers do not well to forget that their children are, by very order of nature, their disciples. A disciple is a follower of a teacher, leader, or philosopher. And they are your disciples in the same way that Christ had disciples. He didn't force them to do what He said. He just taught them. That's how we teach our children, and they follow our principles and values. Every quality has its defect. Every default has its quality. Examine your child. He has qualities. He has defects to help him balance out the two, so neither run away with him, but he claims mastery over both to his use. I love, love, love this stuff so much. We each of us have our own strengths and weaknesses, and we are the master over both to our own use. So it's advisable to identify what your strengths and weaknesses are, so you can make wise decisions in regards to both. Give them opportunity and direction, and children will do the greater part of their own education, intellectual, aesthetic, even moral. Charlotte Mason strongly supports providing children with as many good ideas as possible. You just feed them more and more and more good ideas. You don't know what will stick. You honestly don't. You don't know what's going to spark their interest, and so she purports just providing them with as many different ideas as possible and allowing them to follow the passion. Disposition, intellect, genius come pretty much by nature, but character is an achievement possible to us for ourselves and for our children, and all real advance in family or individual is along the lines of character. There it is, folks. The only true work in this life is to develop your character and prepare for the day you meet God, and at least at the end of the day, to be able to look yourself in the face. And maybe those two things are indeed the same thing. Our obligation towards each quality. Nourishment, exercise, change, and rest. Nourish as much as he takes on his own. Exercise. Use the quality. Change. Delightful change of thought. Work altogether different from original. Rest. Never let the child's brain work exceed his chances of reparation. One thing at a time, and that done well appears to be nature's rule. Just to sum up, our job in this life is to nourish the positive qualities of our character, exercise them as much as possible, switch between them as opportunity arises, and to allow ourselves adequate rest. You do not have to work yourself to death. Changing between the qualities is usually rest enough. The thing best worth living for is to be of use. There it is, folks, the solution to nihilism and apathy way back in the 1900s. The thing best worth living for is to be of use, be of service to your fellow man. It's not always easy, but it brings about a very fulfilling and meaningful existence. Give the child an absorbing pursuit and a fascinating hobby, and you need not fear eccentric or unworthy developments. This got my attention right away first time I read it. Absorbing, fascinating, and healthy hobbies are the best antidote to developing unworthy characteristics. For let this be borne in mind, whatever ugly quality disfigures the child, he is but a garden overgrown with weeds. The more prolific the weeds, the more fertile the soil. He has within him every possibility of beauty of life and character. What a positive outlook for what one might consider a problem child. It's not that they're a bad kid or a bad person. They are just are overgrown with weeds. Their character is just overgrown with weeds. And what a beautiful sentiment that the more prolific the weeds, the more fertile the soil. They can develop a good life and a good character. It just takes some effort to help them rip out some of the weeds and plant and replace it with the good things. It is the words and acts which come from us without conscious thought which afford the true measure of what we are. Or at the very least, a glance into what kind of voices we habitually give ear to in our mind. And a great function of the educator is to secure that acts shall be so regularly, purposefully, and methodically sown that the child shall reap the habits of the good life in thinking and doing with the minimum of conscious effort. It is Charlotte Mason's opinion that one of the best things we can do for our children is help them develop the habits of a good life while they are under our care. That way, it's second nature to them and they don't have to work so hard at it. The formation of habits is one of the chief means whereby we modify the original hereditary disposition of the child until it becomes the character of the man. That's the good news, people. You can change your habits, which means you can change your destiny. The functions of education may be roughly defined as twofold. A, the formation of habits. B, the presentation of idea. The first, physiological. The second, purely spiritual. This was one of her go-to phrases. The formation of habits is education, and education is the formation of habits. So what habits are you forming on a day-to-day basis? The other aspect of education, as she delineates here, is the purely spiritual exposure to new ideas and experiences through literature and reading, which is a spiritual exercise from her perspective.